Hello everyone, thanks to be back here on the Osium channel. Today I would like to offer some thoughts about company culture, because we have probably all been involved in projects to change our company culture, and many have probably made this observation that big efforts are made, but that very often the success of these initiatives is relatively modest. And sometimes even fail. And that despite the fact that our companies are inventing life-saving therapies, that they are inventing revolutionary new communication technologies or transportation technologies, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to adjusting our company culture, then to everyone's surprise very often, there are these barriers. And these barriers exist despite the fact that all the efforts are made to maybe conduct a culture audit, probably to use engagement survey feedback, probably to observe the symbols in our companies, maybe even to change offices to some open space. And despite all of these efforts, sometimes we don't achieve what we had set out for at the beginning. Why? I believe that we have all of the explicit, the visible parts of our organizations, the rules, the organization charts, the job descriptions, indeed the symbols, the space, the way offices are designed, and so on and so forth. But in addition to that, we have the so-called unwritten rules of the game. This is the title of a great book by Peter Scott Morgan, who has observed companies over many years and who has come to the conclusion that in addition to those written rules, there are the so-called unwritten rules. I think it is probably good to look into some of the examples. What are such unwritten rules? And I have recently interacted with a person from a company that is very well known for being quite aggressive and performance oriented. But when I spoke to that person, she outlined to me that in reality, it is important to keep long email trails in order to be able to show responsibility so that the blame doesn't fall on you. And that is very indicative of an unwritten rule. The unwritten rule is protect your back in order to avoid being blamed for something. And then, of course, that has an impact on how people truly behave. You know, companies that say we want to have innovation, but then any failure is punished. Companies that say we want to have this open communication, but then if the CEO kills a messenger who has a bad news, that will be observed. And then the unwritten rule will become don't bring up bad news. If we have an open door policy, but it is known that that is to be used in order to show up and be visible, but avoiding to bring anything that is not positive, all of that will shape the company culture. There are many more examples. You know, if within a management team there is the tradition to blame the other team instead of being self-critical, instead of giving each other honest feedback, then again, that will have an impact on these unwritten rules. If, for example, companies promote high performers, but if in reality it is well known that it is better to do the job hopping in order to not be held accountable for things, then that will also become an unwritten rule of the game in the company that will shape the way in reality things work. All of these are examples of unwritten rules of the game. Peter Scott Morgan is suggesting that we can identify them because people in the organization know the unwritten rules. And you can use interviews in a safe failing space with people in order to assess these unwritten rules. Along three aspects, he is suggesting to check the so-called motivators. Motivators are all those aspects that actually drive people to do certain things related to compensation, related to career progression, related to certain status aspects in the company. Then there are the so-called enablers. This is everything that actually is necessary to be able to achieve something in the organization, related to those who have the power, related to what you need to do in order to actually be able to achieve anything in the company. That is not only the organization chart and the hierarchy, but probably also the influences and so on. And then you have the so-called triggers, which is how are things measured. And again, you may have certain P&L KPIs, but then the reality is that maybe there are other ways how things are measured and how people are promoted that you can uncover through these interviews. And the point is that we need to understand if there is an antagony between the unwritten rules and the company culture that we want to implement. Because if there is an antagony, then you may have this lip service. Who has not observed, probably in our organizations, that people pay lip service to a change program? They don't truly believe in it. There is a certain degree of cynicism. But you may also have power plays where in reality there is a barrier. You may have certain ways of camouflage where people probably don't play the game openly. And if worse comes to worse, you may have certain forms of sabotage, which can lead all the way to the suicide of organizations, which has been observed, where despite obvious changes in the environment, there was a blockage inside of the company, and then the company actually couldn't survive despite all odds. Why? Well, probably because the unwritten rules of the game in the company were such that the company could actually not adjust to its environment. So I hope that these thoughts help to take a different approach to company culture projects and to go deeper into the understanding of what is truly driving behavior in our organizations. Thank you very much and see you soon.